Elira grew up hearing one word more than any other. That word was peace. Her father said it at breakfast. Her mother said it before bed. The pack elders said it every time they looked at her, like she was not a girl, but a promise on two legs. Her family, the Voss pack, had been at war with the Draven pack for almost 20 years. Nobody even remembered how it started anymore. Some said it was land. Some said it was an old insult nobody could take back. Some said it was just two strong families who could not stand to see each other win at anything. Whatever the real reason was, it did not matter by the time Elira was born. All that mattered was that people kept dying, farms kept burning, and both sides were tired. So when she turned 19, her father called her into his study and told her the fighting could finally end. All she had to do was marry Cale Draven, the future leader of the rival pack. One wedding, one signature, 20 years of war, gone, just like that. She did not say no. She did not really feel like she had the choice to say no. She just nodded and said, "Okay, Papa," and went back to her room and cried into her pillow so nobody would hear her. Cale was not cruel to her, at least. That was the strange part. In their 6 months of meetings before the wedding, he was polite, correct. He brought her tea the way she liked it after the second visit, which meant he had actually been paying attention, but he never smiled at her, not once. He looked at her like a soldier looks at an order, something to be carried out, not something to be enjoyed. Elira told herself that was fine. She was not marrying him for love. She was marrying him so children in both packs could grow up without learning how to hate before they learned how to read. That felt like a good enough reason to get out of bed every morning. But there was something she never told anyone, something she barely let herself think about, because thinking about it felt like touching a bruise just to see if it still hurt. 6 years earlier, when she was 17, she had gone on a hunting trip with a few of her cousins near the northern border. A storm rolled in faster than anyone expected, the kind of storm that turns a forest into a maze in about 10 minutes. She got separated. She ran, tripped, ran again, and finally found shelter in a small cave, soaked through and shaking so hard her teeth clicked together. She was not alone in that cave. A boy was already there. Maybe 18, maybe 19. Tall, quiet, with the kind of stillness that made her nervous at first and then, strangely, made her feel safe. He did not ask her name. He did not ask where she came from. He just took off his coat, put it around her shoulders, and sat close enough that she could stop shaking. They talked all night, not about anything important, about the stars they couldn't see because of the clouds, about whether wolves dream in color, about nothing really, and also about everything, the way two strangers talk when they think they will never see each other again, and so there is nothing to protect and nothing to hide. Near morning, when the storm had almost passed, he did something she never fully understood until years later. He pressed his forehead against her collarbone, said "Stay still," and something warm and strange moved under her skin, like a hand pressing a seal into wax. She did not know what it was. She was young, and she had grown up sheltered from the older customs of her kind. By the time she got home, feverish and confused, her mother told her it was nothing, just cold and shock playing tricks on her mind. Elira wanted to believe that. It was easier than believing a stranger in a cave had done something permanent to her without her even understanding what it was. She never saw his face clearly, not really. The cave had been too dark, and her mind had been too tired. She never learned his name. And after a while, she convinced herself the whole night had just been something her exhausted brain invented to survive a bad storm. 6 years later, standing in front of a mirror in her wedding dress, she still sometimes touched that spot on her collarbone without knowing why. The morning of the wedding, her mother came in to help with her hair. Her mother's hands were shaking a little, though she tried to hide it. "You look beautiful," her mother said. "I look like a peace treaty," Elira said, and her mother laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that comes out when someone does not know whether to cry instead. The ceremony was set to happen in the great hall of House Marrow, a place both packs agreed was neutral ground. The hall was old, built from gray stone that had seen more funerals than weddings, if the smell of the place was anything to go by. Cedar smoke curled from iron braziers along the walls. Drummers sat near the back, waiting for their signal. Cale was already standing at the altar when Elira walked in. He wore black, like always. His jaw was set, his shoulders straight, his eyes fixed somewhere just past her, like he could not quite bring himself to look directly at the woman he was about to marry. Elira understood that. She could not quite bring herself to look directly at him either. The priestess began the words that both packs had used for centuries. Words about bonding, about blood, about two houses becoming one. Elira had heard these words read at other weddings her whole life. She never thought she would be the one standing still while they were said over her head like a spell. Who claims this daughter of Voss, before Pack and Blood and Sky? The doors did not open slowly. They were thrown open, hard enough that the sound cracked through the hall like something breaking. Everyone turned. The drummers stopped mid-beat, which left a strange, unfinished silence hanging in the air, like a held breath nobody remembered to let out. A man walked in, tall, broad through the shoulders in the way that made people move out of his path without being told to. Elira recognized him after a second, and her stomach dropped in a way she did not expect. It was Eric Thorne, king of the Northern Reach. She had met him only twice before, once at a border meeting where he'd said maybe 4 words the entire afternoon, and once at a funeral where he had said nothing at all, just stood at the back like a shadow that had decided to attend out of respect. He was not invited today. Nobody from the Northern Reach had any business being at this wedding. His pack was not part of the war between Voss and Draven. He had no reason to be here, and yet here he was, walking straight down the middle of the hall like he owned the floor beneath his boots. He stopped at the base of the altar steps. He did not bow. He did not apologize for interrupting. He looked past Cale, past the priestess, straight at Elira, and said 2 words that would change the rest of her life. She's mine. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even the torches on the wall seemed to hold still. Then Cale's hand went to the knife at his belt. Not really a decision yet, just an old habit kicking in before his brain caught up. "This is a sealed ceremony, Thorne," he said, his voice low and careful. "You have no claim here." "I have the oldest claim there is," Arik said. He still had not looked at Cale even once. His eyes stayed on Elira, and something in his face slipped for just a moment. A crack in the calm, controlled look kings are supposed to wear in public. Underneath it was something rawer, something almost afraid. "Marked at 17, in the Reach, in a storm. You remember the storm, even if nobody ever wrote it down." Elira's hand moved to her collarbone before she even told it to. The room tilted a little. Cedar smoke, old stone, the taste of her own heartbeat suddenly loud in her ears. She remembered a boy in a cave, a coat around her shoulders, a forehead pressed against her skin, a warmth that had never fully gone away, no matter how many times she told herself it was nothing. "You," she whispered. It was not a question, it was a memory finally being allowed to finish itself. Cale's voice, when it came again, was quiet, in a way that was somehow worse than shouting would have been. "You marked a girl and disappeared for 6 years. You let her father sell her to me like livestock, and you said nothing. And now, 6 years later, you walk in here and expect the room to just hand her over?" "I spent 6 years making sure there was a kingdom left standing to put her in," Arik said. "Border raids. 3 assassination attempts. A war on my northern flank I never once mentioned to anyone south of the mountains, because mentioning it would have made me look weak, and a weak king gets his people killed." He finally turned his eyes to Cale, and there was something almost like respect in the way he did it, which made it worse, somehow not better. "I'm not here to insult your house. Take the borderland as payment for the trouble. Take the cattle rights. I'll sign any paper that keeps the peace you were trying to buy with her." He paused, his jaw tightened. "I won't sign the one that keeps her." The priestess found her voice again, thin and shaking. "The bond cannot be forced onto a person. It can only be recognized," Arik said, finishing the sentence for her without meaning to be rude about it. "That's all I'm asking this room to do. Recognize what already exists. I'm not asking for permission to feel something I've felt since I was 18 years old and half frozen in a cave. I'm asking this room not to pretend it isn't real just because it's inconvenient." Cale did not reach for his knife again. Instead, he did something that surprised almost everyone in the hall, including himself. He turned and looked at Alira, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in 6 months of polite tea and careful silence, and whatever he saw on her face answered a question he had not even asked out loud yet. Her hand was still pressed to her collarbone. Her eyes were wet, but not with fear, with something closer to relief, the kind of relief that comes when a puzzle piece you'd given up on finally clicks into place. Cale stepped back from the altar. "Then it was never mine to give," he said, mostly to himself, though the whole hall heard it anyway. It never was. Nobody in that room, not even the elders who had planned this wedding for a year, argued with him. Alira walked down the altar steps on legs that did not feel entirely like her own. Eric did not move to grab her hand or pull her toward him. He just stood there, a king, in a stranger's hall, surrounded by a pack that was not his own, waiting to see if she would choose to close the last few feet of distance on her own 2 feet. She did. When she stopped in front of him, the mark on her collarbone burned once, bright and sudden, like something that had been sleeping for 6 years, finally being given permission to wake up. Then it settled, quiet, warm, like it had simply been waiting for her to come home to it. Neither of them said anything grand. There was no big speech. Arik just reached up, very slowly, and brushed a strand of hair away from her face, the same way he must have done in that cave 6 years ago, except this time she could actually see his face while he did it. "I should have come sooner," he said quietly. "I'm sorry it took a wedding to get me here." "You could have written a letter," Alira said, and her voice came out shakier than she meant it to, but there was a small laugh hiding underneath the shakiness too. Would you have believed a letter? She thought about it. 6 years of telling herself the cave was a fever dream. 6 years of touching a mark on her skin and pretending she did not notice it get warm sometimes at night. No, she admitted, probably not. The wedding, of course, did not happen that day. The peace treaty between House Voss and House Draven still needed signing, but it turned out war-weary elders on both sides were far more interested in ending decades of fighting than in one particular wedding going through exactly as planned. Within a month, new terms were drawn up. Land was traded fairly. Old grudges, tired after 20 years of feeding on themselves, finally ran out of fuel. Cale did not become Alira's enemy. That was maybe the part that surprised her most. A few weeks after the interrupted ceremony, he sought her out privately, away from both their families, and told her plainly that he had never once looked forward to their wedding, not because there was anything wrong with her, but because he had never felt anything close to what he saw on her face the moment Eric Thorne walked through those doors. "I would have married you," he said. "I would have kept the peace, but I don't think I would have made you happy, and watching you find out what happiness actually looks like made it pretty hard to be angry about losing you." Alira did not know what to say to that, so she just thanked him and meant it. As for Alira and Eric, their story did not turn into some easy, perfect fairy tale overnight, because real life rarely works that way, even when magic is involved. There were arguments. There was a very long, very uncomfortable conversation about why Eric had waited 6 entire years to come find her, instead of showing up the moment he could safely do so. He explained, patiently and more than once, that a king coming north to claim a girl from a rival house during an active war would have started a conflict, not ended one. That timing had never been about hesitation, it had been about survival, hers included. It took her a while to fully believe that. Trust, once shaken, rarely rebuilds itself in a single conversation. But little by little, through small things, the way he remembered exactly how she liked her tea after being told only once, the way he never once made her feel like she owed him anything for the years he'd spent protecting a kingdom she didn't even know she was a part of, she let herself believe it. They were married almost a year later, in a much smaller ceremony, in the same great hall of House Marrow, though this time nobody's doors got slammed open. Cale attended, standing near the back, and when the priestess asked if anyone objected to the union, the whole hall held its breath out of habit, before remembering there was nobody left who would. Alira wore the same veil pins her mother had used, the ones that had outlived 3 queens and one long, tired war. When the binding cord was finally tied, properly, willingly, with both people actually choosing it, the mark on her collarbone warmed again, gentle this time, steady, like a promise that had finally stopped waiting to be kept. And somewhere in the back of the hall, an old war that had cost 2 families 20 years and more grief than anyone wanted to count, sat quietly finished, folded up and put away, the way old wars sometimes are, not with one final battle, but with one ordinary, stubborn, very human choice to finally stop fighting and start living instead.